The chilly October morning of 2001 began with an unusual commotion on the quiet Beechwood Court street in Princeton, New Jersey. 6 unmarked police cars silently pulled up in front of a 2-story white-painted house where the front lawn was still covered in early morning dew. Neighbors peeked through curtains as New Jersey state troopers in bulletproof vests positioned themselves around the area, some carrying briefcases, others holding arrest warrants. Inside, 63-year-old Charles Bender was preparing his morning coffee, a habit he had maintained since his father, businessman Gregory Bender, passed away more than 20 years earlier. A frantic knocking sounded at 7:41 a.m. Charles Bender, New Jersey State Police. "We have a warrant for your arrest for the destruction of evidence related to the 1948 disappearance of Eleanor Dane." The officers later described how his hand trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup, but his face remained strangely calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment for years, ever since his father's secret began to crack under the light of truth. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In September 1948, Red Bank was a small town on the banks of the Navesink River in New Jersey, where red brick streets ran between rows of 2-story houses, and the whistles of freight trains still echoed into the evening. The post-war town had the peaceful appearance of the American East Coast. Small shops glowing with yellow lights, barber shops, tailor shops, and cafes nestled under the shade of oak trees. In the gray brick building of Atlantic Trust, the area's largest bank, 25-year-old Eleanor Dane finished her last shift of the week. She was an office secretary, described by colleagues as meticulous and rarely leaving her desk until files were perfectly organized. Just before 5 p.m., she packed up her notebooks, buttoned her light blue wool coat, said goodbye to coworkers, and mentioned she would stop by the post office to mail a personal envelope before heading back to her boarding house on Bridge Street. The bank guard remembered her walking out with a small red handbag, her face as calm as any other day. On the street, evening mist began to settle, gas lamps reflecting on the damp pavement. A few locals later said they saw her heading toward the post office, walking quickly, head slightly bowed, as if in a hurry. After that, no one saw her again. Night fell, and her mother in Asbury Park waited for her daily phone call, but the phone stayed silent. She called the boarding house. No one answered. Near dawn, she woke a relative who lived nearby and asked them to check. The small room was still tidy, the bed neatly made, a thin coat hanging on the door hook, with no sign she had returned that night. The next morning, bank employees noticed Eleanor's desk was empty, drawers still locked, notebooks stacked neatly. A coworker went to the boarding house to confirm, but the landlady said she hadn't come back since the previous day. At that point, Patrick Kellen, her fiancé, traveled from Camden to Red Bank to inquire. He and Eleanor's mother searched every street around the post office and the docks, asking shopkeepers and night watchmen, but no one had any further information. When all leads hit dead ends, they decided to go to the town police station. That afternoon, the two walked into the small police headquarters on Broad Street, carrying a photo of Eleanor in her office dress, young-faced with high curled hair. They explained that she had left the bank the previous afternoon and hadn't been heard from since. The duty officer carefully wrote down every detail, asking for the last confirmed sighting, identifying information, and residence. The report was made in duplicate, one kept in the duty log, the other sent to Chief Roy Bennett. He read the report, underlined a few notes in pencil, then called investigator Joseph Heller into his office. Heller was experienced in searches around the Navesink River area, known for being thorough and familiar with the terrain. After a brief summary, he started with basic questions. Had the victim had any recent personal conflicts? Had she ever stayed out overnight, or expressed a desire to leave town? Eleanor's mother answered firmly. No. She described her daughter as punctual, always showing up to work on time, calling home every evening. Patrick Kellen added, Eleanor drove a cream-colored Ford Tudor, license plate NJ6243. Bought the previous year, and her usual route home was from the Atlantic Trust Bank on Front Street. past the post office, then to the boarding house on Bridge Street. Heller wrote everything down, adding a detailed physical description: approximately 5'6", light brown hair, blue eyes, wearing a light blue wool coat, low-heeled shoes, carrying a small red handbag. After compiling everything, he presented it to Bennett for review. The chief ordered an immediate missing person file, marking it as an adult disappearance with suspicious circumstances. Bennett assigned Heller as lead investigator and mobilized 2 patrol officers for support. The first task was to sweep 3 key areas: the route from the bank to the post office, the path from the post office to the boarding house, and the Riverside Road leading to the docks. Patrol units were assigned to search the routes, noting any unusual objects or abandoned vehicles. A typed description of Eleanor was sent to the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office and posted in the duty room for all personnel. Heller contacted the Red Bank Post Office to verify if she had mailed anything that evening. He also prepared a witness list: bank employees, the building guard, the landlady, and several residents along Maple Street. That afternoon, after a quick briefing in the records room, Bennett signed the official file, coded 48 NJS 237. All related documents were gathered into a separate folder, sequentially numbered for easy updates. In an internal memo, he emphasized 3 initial investigation goals: determine the victim's last known location, verify her personal vehicle, and narrow down suspicious areas around the Navesink River. By evening, the first police teams began checking downtown streets, asking residents and shop owners if they had seen a woman matching the description the previous night. The lights in the records room stayed on late as Bennett reviewed short reports from the patrol teams. He knew the first hours were always the most critical in any missing person case. When the final report of the day was clipped into the new file, the case of Eleanor Dane, Red Bank, New Jersey, was officially recorded as an active missing person investigation. The next morning, the search entered its second day. Patrol teams were deployed to check southward from downtown Red Bank, where a narrow road wound toward the Navesink River docks between reed beds and old warehouses. The weather was cold, thick fog limiting visibility to a few dozen meters. Investigator Joseph Heller and 2 officers led the vanguard, carrying a map marked with the 3 priority areas designated by Chief Bennett. They swept each road segment, shining flashlights into ditches and along the grass, looking for tire tracks. By mid-morning, as weak sunlight pierced the fog, an officer spotted the mudguard of a car protruding from bushes near a turnoff to the riverbank. Heller halted the group, approached, and confirmed it was a cream-colored Ford Tudor, license plate NJ 6243, matching Eleanor Dane's vehicle. The car was parked off-angle, right front wheel sunk deep in mud, rear end close to the slope down to the water. Doors locked, windows closed, no one around. Heller immediately radioed headquarters for Bennett and requested additional units to secure the scene. When the chief and the technical team arrived, the area was cordoned off with police tape, and all non-essential personnel were ordered to leave. As the fog lifted, the ground revealed overlapping tire tracks, but only one set was fresh: the Ford Tudor's, extending from the main road down toward the river before stopping abruptly. Heller noted the weather, vehicle orientation, road condition, and geographic position, numbering the scene diagram. The car was unlocked using a spare key provided by the family. Inside, the interior was nearly untouched, with no signs of forced entry or rummaging. The driver's seat was pushed back farther than Eleanor's usual position, according to Patrick Kellen, suggesting someone else may have driven it. Fuel gauge nearly full, parking brake released. On the floor, technicians found a few wet sand grains and faint shoe prints, sole pattern unclear. The trunk contained only repair tools and a spare coat. No unusual papers or items. The exterior had dried mud streaks consistent with driving on wet dirt roads the previous night. No scratches or collision damage. Heller checked the water's edge below the slope, observing mud footprints, 2 types, one smaller, one larger, intermingled, leading from the car to the river and back. No long skid marks or drag grooves. Localized sinking indicated someone had stood there briefly. Combining the scene diagram, Heller determined this was not a normal parking spot. Someone likely drove the vehicle there and left via a back path behind the warehouses. As the sun rose higher, support teams arrived, taking photographs, measuring distances, collecting soil samples, sand grains, and tire tread impressions. An on-site report noted, no signs of robbery, no evidence of a traffic accident, vehicle in good condition, no missing property. The only anomaly was the parking position, too close to the river, front end sharply angled away from the main path. Bennett ordered the vehicle sealed and towed to the police impound for further analysis. Before leaving, Heller staked the location, marked coordinates on the map, and noted the area's condition: thick mud, narrow access, little traffic. Beside the slope, an old no trespassing sign, with faded letters, indicated the area had rarely been patrolled. After completing the report, Bennett signed off on the first scene findings and added to the file, victim's personal vehicle located at Navesink River docks, no evidence of robbery, accident, or voluntary disappearance. The report was sent to the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office that evening, along with scene photos and a list of collected samples. The preliminary conclusion was unanimous. Eleanor Dane's disappearance may involve foul play, and the investigation needed to shift toward criminal activity. As the sun set, the riverbank area was locked down, with 2 officers assigned to guard it overnight, awaiting the next phase. The following morning, the Monmouth County Sheriff's Crime Scene Unit arrived at the riverbank for a detailed survey. The fog had just lifted, the ground still damp, and strong wind from the river bent the reeds, carrying the smell of mud and oil. Investigator Joseph Heller and the technicians re-examined the entire cordoned area from the previous day. The Ford Tudor had been towed to the lab, leaving only the markers, wooden stakes, and boundary tape. Heller started at the dirt road's edge, where tire ruts were deepest. He measured the track width, about 56 inches, matching Eleanor's car. 10 meters away, another track crossed diagonally, wider with clear heavy sedan tread patterns and uneven wear. Technicians recorded it with a scale ruler and photographed from 3 angles for later comparison. The entire 20-meter stretch was gridded into 4 sections for soil sampling. At the slope's edge by the river, Heller noted numerous intermingled footprints. Smaller ones pointed toward the water, larger ones with deep heel marks, and pronounced sole edges faced back toward the bank. Impression depth suggested the person in larger shoes was much heavier, with deliberate steps and longer standing time. Heller ordered plaster casts, labeling each sample. Every print was close-up photographed, with direction, depth, and stride distance noted. Along the water's edge, technicians recovered a partially dry Chesterfield cigarette butt and a broken match nearby, the head still showing friction marks. Both were bagged separately as 4A and 4B, sealed on-site for lab transfer. During sampling, Heller spotted an unusual patch of soil mixed with black oil and metal gravel near the larger tire track. He directed 3 control samples, 1 from the anomaly, 2 from adjacent areas for comparison. The team also measured the slope height from road to riverbank, about 3.2 meters, noting incline angle and mud sinkage to determine if the car could roll on its own. Results showed the slope was insufficient without external force. Technicians checked surrounding bushes, finding several freshly broken branches, likely from nighttime passage. No signs of heavy objects dragged or continuous sliding toward the water. From the data, Heller sketched a scaled scene diagram, car stop position, access path, footprint zones, and movement directions. He added notes: wind from southwest, river level, estimated 30 centimeters above normal, sampling time 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. All photos were developed on-site with mobile equipment and attached to the file. Chief Bennett arrived late morning, reviewing Heller's preliminary map. He noted the footprint groups were far enough apart to infer 2 people, one moving from the car to the water, one returning to the bank. In the initial scene report, Bennett wrote briefly, "Strong possibility of a second person at the riverbank. Timing matches victim's disappearance." The technical team continued sweeping the left side trail into the docks, rarely used. They found a fainter secondary tire track running parallel at first, then vanishing at a bend. Soil from that area was separately numbered for additional testing. By afternoon, the survey concluded over 30 photos, 12 evidence items collected, and a detailed location map. All evidence was sealed in the technical team's containers, with a transfer report handed to the lead investigator. The riverbank remained cordoned, warning signs posted at the entrance. The day's final report summarized initial findings. Vehicle location matched victim's travel route, no accident signs, no missing property, but clear evidence of at least 2 people present simultaneously. This conclusion, with photos and diagrams, was sent to Chief Bennett's desk as the basis for the next investigation phase. In the following days, investigator Joseph Heller focused on statements from anyone who might have seen Eleanor Dane the evening she vanished. Using the mapped route from the bank to the riverbank, he selected 3 main survey points: the cafe on Front Street, Red Bank Post Office, and the area near the docks, with a private taxi stand operating late. At Maple Diner, owner Helen Morris confirmed Eleanor was a regular. She clearly remembered that evening. After closing time, Eleanor stopped by alone, ordered a black coffee to go, paid with loose change, face slightly tense but still polite. No one accompanied her, and no car was parked directly outside, except the familiar light-colored Ford. When pressed, Helen said Eleanor stayed only a few minutes before heading toward the post office. Heller noted every detail, marking the estimated time around 6 p.m. Leaving the diner, he went to the Red Bank Post Office, where Eleanor often mailed letters to her mother in Asbury Park. The evening clerk, Martin Keene, confirmed she came to the counter to mail a small brown envelope addressed to Gregory Bender, Atlantic Trust Bank, Red Bank, New Jersey. He remembered because she requested internal delivery stamps, typically used for office documents. When asked about her demeanor, Keene said she spoke normally, showed no hurry or fear, but glanced outside several times while waiting. After completing the transaction, she left through the main door toward the Riverside Road, instead of back toward downtown. Keene confirmed it was the last time he saw her. This was recorded and added to the file. Victim left post office after mailing item to Gregory Bender, approximately 6:30 p.m. Back at headquarters, Heller reported preliminary results to Chief Bennett. Bender's name, the bank director where Eleanor worked, appeared in the case file for the first time. Bennett ordered immediate verification of identity, residence, and relationship to the victim. While the technical team continued scene work, Heller returned to the southern docks, closest to where the Ford Tudor was found. He visited the small Santoro family taxi stand, operating late for port shift workers. Driver Frank Santoro, 32, provided crucial information. He recalled the night Eleanor disappeared. While waiting for fares near the river turnoff, he saw a black car leave the area around 9 p.m. Frank described it as a mid-size luxury sedan with chrome hood trim, but couldn't read the plate due to darkness and fog. He only saw the driver was a man wearing a fedora, turning on headlights as he left. When pressed, Frank said he often saw a similar car parked near Atlantic Trust Bank during the day. This statement was documented separately with a diagram of his observation point. Heller checked Riverside homes, but no one else had more specific information. Most confirmed the area was quiet after 7 p.m. Compiling statements, Heller reconstructed Eleanor's movements that evening, left bank after work, stopped at Front Street Cafe, mailed package to Gregory Bender at the post office, then headed toward the river, the road leading to where her car was found. No signs of accident or voluntary departure between locations. Witnesses consistently said she was alone. But the black sedan introduced another possibility: a second person present near the time of disappearance. The initial 10-page witness summary was sent to Chief Bennett with a copy of the envelope template provided by the post office. In his notes, Bennett underlined Gregory Bender's name in red, marking him for interrogation due to direct connection to the victim and being the last recipient of her mailed item before vanishing. By day's end, The Eleanor Dane, Red Bank file gained 3 new appendices: witness statements, estimated travel map, and mailing documents. That information became the foundation for the new investigation direction, moving the disappearance further from a random event and closer to deliberate criminal activity. After reviewing the witness statements and information collected from the post office, Sheriff Bennett directed investigator Joseph Heller to verify all data related to Gregory Bender, the manager of Atlantic Trust Bank, who was also the last person to receive a package sent by Eleanor before she disappeared. The bank's internal records showed that Bender, 42 years old, lived in the residential area on Ventnor Avenue, Red Bank, and had worked at Atlantic Trust for more than 15 years. He was a respected figure in the local financial community, described as calm and reserved, with little social interaction outside of work. However, several bank employees confirmed that Bender and Eleanor had once had a personal romantic relationship, which began around 1946 and ended in the spring of the previous year. When Heller pressed for more details, they said that after the breakup, the two maintained a cordial relationship but were no longer close. This information led Bennett to decide to open a formal interrogation. In the afternoon of September 20th, Heller, accompanied by another officer, went to Gregory Bender's private residence. The 2-story wooden house stood isolated, with a stone-paved driveway and a low fence. Bender received them in the living room, polite but visibly cautious. When asked about Eleanor, he confirmed he knew her, that they had worked together in the bank's administrative department, but insisted he had not seen her for many months. Heller mentioned that she had sent a package addressed to him on the evening she disappeared. Bender replied that he had not received it and knew nothing about it. When asked about his activities on the night of September 13th, he said he had stayed home, reading the newspaper and preparing files for an internal meeting the next day. However, when Heller asked specifically what time he went to bed and whether anyone could confirm it, Bender hesitated for a moment before answering that the housekeeper might know I was home. During the interrogation, Heller noticed that he kept glancing toward the window, avoiding eye contact, and often repeated details in a mechanical way. The first interrogation report was drawn up on the spot. Before leaving, Heller asked additional questions about personal vehicles. Bender said he owned 2 cars, a black Buick sedan used for commuting and an old Plymouth kept in the garage. When asked if the Buick had been used on the evening of September 13th, he replied, "No, the car was home." However, subsequent questioning of the housekeeper, Margaret Doyle, yielded different results. In her statement at the police station, Doyle said that around 8 p.m. that evening, she saw Bender leave the house in a dark suit, wearing a fedora, driving the Buick. She remembered it because the engine made a loud noise when he backed out of the garage. She did not see him return until after midnight, when the garage light turned on for a few minutes and then went off. The next morning, the car had been washed clean, and he instructed her, no need to clean the downstairs. Heller noted this statement in the file, adding that the timing and description matched the time frame when witness Frank Santoro had seen a black sedan leaving the riverbank area. Additionally, a neighbor named Thomas Green, who lived across the street, also confirmed hearing Bender's car leave the house that evening. Green said he often recognized the distinctive engine sound of the Buick because Bender maintained it himself. This information caused the investigation to focus entirely on him. Bennett ordered a check of personal firearm registration records and discovered that Bender owned a .30 carbine rifle with a valid permit registered in 1947. When asked, Bender did not deny it, saying he collected guns as a hobby and usually kept them in a safe at home. However, when Heller requested to inspect it, he claimed the weapon had been sent for maintenance. A second interview report was drawn up, in which Bender continued to insist he had not left the house and had no involvement in the disappearance. He signed the statement, but refused to allow a search of the house without a court warrant. In the report sent to Sheriff Bennett, Heller commented that Bender's statements were inconsistent, showing signs of evasion and contradicting independent witnesses. Based on the compilation of evidence, the prior romantic relationship with the victim, the fact that the victim sent a package to him right before disappearing, the appearance of the black car near the scene, Along with the statements from the housekeeper and neighbor, Bennett decided to place Gregory Bender on the official suspect list in Eleanor Dane's disappearance. A separate file was opened, coded additionally as 48 NJS 237A, clearly recording his name, address, occupation, and connection to the victim. The sheriff ordered monitoring of his asset movements and travel in the coming days, while gathering more information from other bank employees to determine the recent level of closeness between the two. That evening, in a memo sent to superiors, Bennett concluded briefly, Gregory Bender, subject likely directly involved in the disappearance, requires close surveillance and verification of movements on the night of September 13. The file was stamped and placed in the investigation room's metal cabinet, marking the first major turning point in the process of understanding Eleanor Dane's disappearance. 2 days after Gregory Bender was identified as the prime suspect, Sheriff Bennett filed a request for a search warrant with the Monmouth County Court, citing circumstantial evidence, the housekeeper's statement, the witness who saw a black sedan in the riverbank area, and the contradictions in the subject's own statements. The warrant was temporarily signed on the morning of September 22, limiting the search to the house and garage owned by Bender, and allowing the seizure of any evidence potentially related to Eleanor Dane's disappearance. That same day, investigator Joseph Heller led a team of 3 officers and 2 forensic technicians to execute it. Bender's house stood isolated at the end of a stone-paved road, surrounded by maple trees and a tall iron gate. When the police arrived, Bender was already standing at the door, calm but cold, with his personal attorney, Raymond Clark, whom he had called that morning. After reading the warrant, Bennett demanded cooperation. Bender only nodded, saying he had nothing to hide. The search began in the garage, where he kept the 2 cars. The black Buick sedan was parked right inside, unusually clean, with shiny paint and water streaks still running down the body, indicating it had just been washed. The technicians examined the garage floor and walls, discovering a pair of high-top leather boots in the corner, the soles caked with dried mud. When asked, Bender said they were hunting boots used on a weekend outing the previous week. The boots were immediately sealed, coded G1. Next to them was a thick, gray wool coat, with dark brown stains on the hem. A technician examined the stains under a handheld light, determining they were a mixture of soil and oil. The coat was packaged separately, code G2. In a wooden cabinet near the workbench, police found a box of .30 carbine ammunition, a brown paper box labeled with the manufacturer Western cartridge. The count was 47 rounds. While the registration log indicated each box contained 50, Heller asked about the missing 3 rounds. Bender replied that he had test-fired them in the woods last month. The answer was recorded in the report. In addition to the main evidence, the technical team also collected a floor mat from the trunk because of a small stain and a mud-stained rag in the laundry basin. Everything was packaged, labeled, and timed. The search of the ground floor and office took nearly 3 hours with no resistance. Attorney Clark followed every step closely, taking notes in a notebook, occasionally demanding that police not touch documents not listed in the warrant. When the team finished, Bennett announced that the samples would be taken to the department's laboratory for soil and stain analysis. Bender reacted with a faint smile, saying, "You're wasting your time." The next day, technicians began preliminary analysis at the Red Bank lab. The soil from the soles of boots G1 was rinsed and examined under a microscope, revealing fine sand, organic mud, and a small amount of mineral oil. When compared to soil samples from the Navesink riverbank scene, the results showed partial matches. The sand and mud composition were similar, but the oil ratio differed, possibly due to samples being taken a few meters apart. The report stated clearly, "Cannot conclude definitively, but likelihood of same geographic origin exists." Regarding the stains on coat G2, chemical analysis showed a mixture of soil and light industrial oil, similar to the type found near the river's edge. For the .30 carbine ammunition box, technical checks confirmed it was the same type Bender had declared in his ownership application, though the missing 3 rounds were noted separately, as there was no basis yet to determine where they had been used. The preliminary report was submitted to Bennett on September 24th. He read every line carefully, marking in red pen the sections noting partial match and insufficient for conclusion. In an internal note, he wrote evidence valuable for reference, not yet sufficient for charges. That afternoon, Attorney Clark filed a request to return all seized items, arguing that holding them was no longer legally justified due to lack of specific evidence of a crime. After consulting the county prosecutor, Bennett was forced to temporarily comply, but demanded to keep photographs and analysis results. Before handover, he personally inspected each item one last time. The boots still had cracked, dried mud. The coat carried a faint oil smell. The ammunition box was neatly closed. Everything was resealed and returned in original condition, accompanied by a receipt document. When signing for receipt, Bender said briefly, "I trust justice will do its job." Sheriff Bennett only replied, "We hope so too." After the search, the investigation team compiled the results to update File 48, NJS 237A. Heller wrote in the summary report, "No blood traces or signs of struggle found in suspect's home. Soil on boots may match scene soil, but insufficient basis for conclusion. Recommend continued surveillance and further data collection on subject's movements on the night of September 13th. The 12-page report was read twice by Bennett before he signed off. Though there was no direct incriminating evidence, every detail from Bender leaving the house in the evening to the evidence showing similarities to the scene was retained in the file with the note, "Special Monitoring." When the internal meeting ended, the room fell silent. The younger officers waited for new orders, and Bennett only said briefly, "We don't have the answer yet, but at least we know where to look." That statement closed the first search phase in the Eleanor Dane file, a cautious but necessary step before the case turned in a different direction. 3 days after the search of Gregory Bender's home, the search operation shifted to the Navesink River area, where Eleanor Dane's car had been found. The Red Bank Police Force coordinated with the Coast Guard unit stationed at Atlantic Highlands to launch an underwater sweep plan. The search order was issued on the morning of September 25th, focusing on a 2-mile stretch of the river, including dock number 3 and the shallow waters near the shore, where the car was recovered. At this time, the river level was lower than average, favorable for diving and net dragging. Investigator Joseph Heller directed operations on site, along with 4 professional Coast Guard divers. The work was divided into 3 phases: surface probing, riverbed survey, and collection of floating debris. In the morning, 2 small boats moved parallel along the shore. One deployed a drag net, the other used iron hooks to sweep the bottom in depths of 3 to 5 meters. The river water was murky and cold, with near-zero visibility. Heller stood on the dock observing, continuously noting wind direction, current flow, and timing of each sweep. After 2 hours, the first diver surfaced, reporting a fabric item tangled around a wooden piling near the dock. The object was pulled up, a brightly colored silk scarf, slightly frayed at the edges. When dried, they recognized faint embroidered initials, ED, matching the initials in Eleanor Dane's name. The evidence was sealed, coded N1, and transferred to forensic technicians. Continuing another 200 meters downstream, the search team recovered a small beige fabric scrap, fine fiber, covered in mud and algae. Compared to photos of Eleanor's clothing in the file, the material matched the sweater she wore when leaving the bank. This sample was packaged separately, labeled N2. Though the 2 items partially matched the victim's description, Heller still noted in the report that insufficient basis to confirm origin. By noon, strong winds caused small waves on the river surface, making diving difficult. The Coast Guard used sonar equipment to scan the riverbed terrain, searching for large metal objects like cars, barrels, or suitcases. Results only recorded old wooden pilings and a small boat wreck, with no unusual signs. In the afternoon, as the tide receded, Heller and 2 officers walked along the western riverbank, where reeds grew thickly. They found a few eroded footprints, no longer clear enough to cast. A Coast Guard officer noted that the current in this area was strong, Any floating object could be swept out to the bay in a few hours. The survey team's conclusion was that the probability of finding a body was low. If present, it likely had been carried far away by the current. By the end of the day, the entire search team returned to the main dock. Heller prepared a comprehensive report of results, recording operation duration, sweep range, coordinates of findings, and environmental conditions. In the evaluation section, he stated clearly, no body or direct traces of the victim found, but the recovered evidence strengthened the hypothesis that Eleanor had been at the riverbank area before disappearing. The report was submitted to Sheriff Bennett that same evening. He reviewed photos of the silk scarf and fabric scrap, ordered them stored in the evidence locker, and sent samples to the Monmouth County lab for fiber and dye analysis. In a handwritten note at the bottom of the page, Bennett wrote briefly, "No signs of voluntary departure, high likelihood disappearance involves third-party actions." That was the first time since the case opened that Red Bank Police officially issued a temporary conclusion that Eleanor Dane's disappearance involved criminal elements. The river search was paused pending analysis results, but the entire dock area remained sealed, preserved until further orders. 1 week after the Coast Guard ended the underwater search, Eleanor Dane's family received an envelope sent through the mail. The envelope was typed with the sender's name as Eleanor Dane, address Red Bank, New Jersey, postmarked October 1, 1948. Inside was a sheet of paper folded in half, with brief content, "I need to leave for a while. Please don't worry or look for me. I want to start a new life somewhere else. Trust that I'm okay. Love everyone. Eleanor." Upon reading the letter, her mother immediately felt uneasy. The writing style was stiff and dry, unlike the handwritten letters her daughter sent every week, and especially the signature was typed rather than handwritten. The family brought the letter to the Red Bank Police Station the same day for comparison with the ongoing investigation file. Sheriff Bennett received it and prepared a separate report, as the letter's content could affect the case direction. He summoned investigator Joseph Heller and a document technician from the department to examine it. Heller observed the paper, noting the edges were evenly cut, ivory white paper, the type commonly used in offices rather than personal stationery. Under a magnifying glass, the typewriter ribbon impressions were clear, narrow serif font, characteristic of mid-1940s Remington Rand models. This caught Heller's attention because, according to prior statements, Gregory Bender's office at Atlantic Trust Bank used the same type of machine for drafting documents. He immediately requested the technician to photograph enlarged images of each character, comparing them to documents obtained from the bank during the first search. Preliminary results showed that the E and R characters on the letter had identical wear marks to those on the ribbon from the bank's Remington used for contracts. The report noted, high mechanical match, likely same equipment origin. However, when comparing the signature, the technician confirmed the typed Eleanor was completely different from her handwriting style in personal letters. The lack of ink traces and fingerprints made it impossible to determine who composed or sent it. Bennett called the Red Bank postmaster to ask about stamp issuance and postmark procedures. They confirmed the letter was mailed locally in town, possibly by someone familiar with the post office area, but there were no cameras or witnesses since it was sent in the afternoon when few people were around. Heller made copies of the entire envelope and contents, sealing the original in evidence bag T1. He noted in his log, high probability of forged letter intended to delay investigation progress. When Bennett presented the report to the county prosecutor, he requested a subpoena for Bender again to question him about the typewriter. However, his attorney responded immediately that the client no longer had that machine. It was replaced early this year. In 1948, police lacked technology for ink analysis or detailed fingerprinting. Determining typewriter ribbon origin was limited to mechanical comparison, insufficient for prosecution evidence. The report concluded, sender cannot be identified. Document shows no signs of legal forgery under current law. Investigator Heller felt stuck. Every clue pointed to Bender, but there was no direct evidence. The silk scarf and fabric from the river were still awaiting analysis. Results were expected to take many weeks. Meanwhile, local media began running stories about the prolonged disappearance, increasing public pressure. Bennett decided to keep silent about the letter, only informing internally that the case was still under verification. Eleanor's family was advised to temporarily not share information with the press to avoid affecting the investigation. But for them, the letter's content was like a blow. It offered faint hope that she was alive, while forcing them to face the terrifying possibility someone was deliberately creating a fake message to mislead. In the final internal memo of the month, Bennett wrote, "Forged letter strengthens hypothesis of active concealment of criminal acts. However, lacks scientific means to prove. File remains open pending analysis results." The case entered a quiet phase, interrogations paused, and the pages of Eleanor Dane's file closed in silence, a silence heavier than the autumn river slowly flowing through the city. In the summer of 1949, nearly 11 months after Eleanor Dane vanished, the investigation file had seen almost no further progress. Every lead circled back to the starting point. The Monmouth County lab results confirmed that the silk scarf and fabric fragment drifting on the river had fiber composition matching merchandise from a store where Eleanor used to shop, but could not be definitively tied to her personal ownership. The soil samples, mud stains, and evidence collected from Gregory Bender's home all returned inconclusive. The forged letter, after repeated comparisons, remained only a hypothesis that it might have been typed on bank equipment, yet lacked sufficient legal basis for prosecution. As time passed, witnesses began to slightly alter their statements. The cafe owner was no longer certain the day Eleanor stopped by was the day she disappeared. The taxi driver said he could no longer swear the black sedan he saw that night was Bender's. The scattered pieces gradually lost value, blurred by time and uncertainty. Heller, who had followed the case from the beginning, was nearly out of hope for new evidence. In weekly briefings he reported, "No direct signs of crime, no body, no certain witnesses." Sheriff Bennett, though still convinced Eleanor had not left voluntarily, had to admit the file could not drag on indefinitely. He contacted the county prosecutor for guidance on suspending the investigation. Administrative procedure required a full summary report listing every step taken, costs, evidence, and lab findings. The 47-page report, drafted by Heller, included the complete witness list, search locations, and a map of the Navesink River area. The final line on the first page read, "No authentic evidence found proving the victim is either alive or dead." On August 10, 1949, Bennett signed the official document requesting suspension of investigation and transfer of the case to unsolved status. The county court approved the same day, assigning archive code #48 NJS 237. A copy was sent to the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office for entry into the missing person, unresolved cases catalog. All evidence was gathered: soil samples, plaster shoe casts, cigarette butts, broken matches, the forged letter, silk scarf, fabric scrap, and scene photographs. Each evidence package was rewrapped in paper bags, sealed with red wax, and stamped RBPD evidence storage. Bennett personally checked the sealed inventory and signed the final confirmation line. The entire evidence box was moved to the basement storage vault of the Red Bank Police Department, where temperature was kept stable for long-term preservation. Duplicate investigation reports and lab findings were placed in brown hard covers labeled Eleanor Dane, Missing, 1948. In the transfer log, Heller wrote a short note, "No signs of life found, case closed without conclusion." Sheriff Bennett read the entire file one last time before closing the lid. He paused at the page, recording the last time Eleanor was seen, the typed letters blurred from age. Setting down his pen, he said only to Heller, "We've done everything we could." That sentence ended nearly a year of continuous investigation. Hundreds of hours of searches and dozens of interrogations. In the final report sent to County, Bennett wrote, Insufficient evidence of crime to continue. Victim missing, status undetermined. File temporarily closed, ready to reopen upon new evidence. The town of Red Bank returned to its quiet rhythm. Articles about the disappearance gradually vanished from front pages. At the police station, box #48, NJS 237, lay silent on a wooden shelf among hundreds of others. Per regulation, storage staff checked inventory once a year, confirming seal integrity and logging it. That year, a new line was added, Eleanor Dane. No new developments. File unchanged. The investigation closed in silence, with no public statement beyond the cold administrative line. Case status unresolved. And so Eleanor Dane's disappearance slipped into oblivion, surviving only in the memories of those who had worked the case, people who knew they had come very close to the truth, but could never quite touch it. More than half a century passed since Eleanor Dane's missing person file was sealed. In 2001, the state of New Jersey launched a project to review and digitize unsolved cases, focusing on old files stored in county police vaults. The Cold Case Unit, headquartered in Trenton, was established to receive, examine, and recatalog all materials. Among thousands of old boxes shipped from towns across the state was a worn wooden crate labeled in faded ink, Red Bank PD, 1948. The line beneath was nearly illegible, but the code remained readable, #48, NJS 237. During inventory, investigator Nora Kellen, 34, assigned to the Monmouth area, noticed the box because its red wax seals were still intact, uncracked. Per protocol, any file never reopened had to be evaluated for additional forensic value. Kellen noted in the log, missing female, Red Bank, New Jersey, unopened since 1949. Inside, she found a stack of old typed documents, yellowed paper, and oilcloth evidence bags, now darkened with age. Each bag bore handwritten labels: silk scarf N1, fabric scrap N2, cigarette butt C1, soil sample D4. At the bottom was a thick envelope containing a copy of the forged letters sent to the family. Everything remained in its original Red Bank Police Department seals. Kellen read the 1949 summary report and saw the final note: no progress. Files stored indefinitely. She sat quietly for several minutes, turning each page of sparse typed descriptions of the scene, witnesses, and the conclusion, unresolved. In the evidence inventory, she paid special attention to the entry Chesterfield cigarette butt, a tiny item never analyzed in 1948, due to technical limits. With modern forensic technology, a single remaining epithelial cell could identify the smoker. Kellen added a line in blue ballpoint in her workbook, request DNA testing of biological evidence. She then submitted a report to her superior, Lieutenant Richard Myers, head of the Cold Case Unit. In her proposal, Kellen argued that the Eleanor Dane disappearance met all criteria for reinvestigation: intact file, well-preserved evidence, and a named suspect in the original records. Myers approved quickly, signing permission to break seals and transfer samples to the New Jersey State Forensic Laboratory. As technicians resealed the file, Kellen looked at the original report by Sheriff Roy Bennett, written more than half a century earlier, file temporarily closed, ready to reopen upon new evidence. She smiled faintly, recognizing those words as a message across time. Box #48, NJS 237, was placed on priority list number 17 of the review batch, marking a new beginning for a disappearance long thought buried forever in the past. 1 week after file #48, NJS 237, entered the priority list, the New Jersey State Forensic Laboratory in Trenton opened the evidence box under current protocol. The procedure took place in a positive pressure room, witnessed by investigator Nora Kellen, representing the Cold Case Unit. When the red wax was cut, the faint smell of old paper and moldy cloth drifted into the air. Evidence bags were arranged on the table, in the order listed in the 1949 inventory. Kellen double-checked each bag against the list. Chesterfield cigarette butt, C1 forged typed letter T1 beige fabric scrap, N2 silk scarf embroidered ED, N1 and soil sample, D4. All remained undamaged. Under the guidance of the forensic biologist, each sample was opened with sterile blades, cores preserved intact. First was the cigarette butt. Under the microscope, the outer paper wrap had turned gray-brown, but the filter tip still showed old moisture stains. Using epithelial cell extraction, they recovered a small amount of organic matter stored in a DNA vial. Simultaneously, another team examined the forged letter. Under normal light, only typed letters were visible, but under 365 nanometers ultraviolet light, a faint line appeared in the lower left corner, tiny characters, as if erased, readable as Pier 9. G. Kellen noted the discovery, sensing the hidden message's potential after more than 50 years. The letter was digitally photographed, enlarged, and resealed. Technicians then took fiber samples from the sweater scrap and silk scarf. Both were well preserved. Fibers still structurally sound. Portions were sent to chemistry for dye analysis, the rest stored for possible trace element testing. Soil sample D4, taken from under the Ford Tudor's wheel, was processed via infrared spectroscopy to identify mineral and oil composition. Results showed an unusually high level of light industrial oil, with signs of machine oil contamination. Compared to historical geological data, the oil matched samples once recorded at the old Bender Trust warehouse lot, the financial company managed by Gregory Bender. This finding was clearly stated in the preliminary report, opening a new line of comparison between the disappearance scene and property once owned by the suspect. 4 days later, DNA results from the Chesterfield butt arrived. The extracted sequence perfectly matched biological data from the Bender bloodline, stored in the state database since 1995, when Bender's son donated blood for medical purposes. Error margin below 0.001%. The report concluded, cigarette butt almost certainly belonged to a direct blood relative of Gregory Bender. Upon reading the results, Kellen requested additional comparison with living relatives' reference DNA to rule out coincidence. The lab confirmed absolute match across 16 loci. She wrote in her log, sample C1 DNA matches Bender lineage. Indirect evidence confirming suspect presence at 1948 scene. Additionally, the chemistry team completed the oil and soil report. Spectral analysis showed the oil in the soil sample had a hydrocarbon structure identical to lubricant used at Bender Trust's mechanical equipment warehouse. This type was rare in the Red Bank area at the time. Most other businesses used crude oil imported from New Haven, while Bender Trust imported exclusively from Atlantic Petroleum. Historical inventory records confirmed the match. As Kellen read this, she understood that the scattered 1948 evidence was now reconnecting through modern science. In the summary report to Lieutenant Myers, she listed the findings: 1 DNA on cigarette butt matches Bender lineage. 2 oil traces and soil composition correspond to Bender Trust warehouse area. 3. Hidden text Pier 9, G on forged letter not yet decoded. The report ended with a proposal to move to the next phase. Verify historical ownership records of Bender Trust riverfront property and survey locations, possibly linked to Pier 9. When Myers signed the report, he commented briefly, "Old evidence retains high investigative value. Proceed with geographic and suspect background cross-checks." After more than half a century, box hash 48, NJS 237 was opened. Evidence once deemed worthless had become precise scientific data, carrying Eleanor Dane's disappearance into a new chapter of the search for truth. The lab results led Nora Kellen to focus on the chemistry report detail. The industrial oil in the scene soil matched the type used at Bender Trust's warehouse. To verify, she began reviewing the company's historical property records. The Monmouth County Land Registry Archives, housed in an old brick building next to the courthouse, preserved surveys and deeds from the early 20th century. In a room smelling of paper and printer oil, Kellen requested files under Bender Trust Holdings, 1935 to 1960. She was handed a thick folder containing copies of ownership certificates, site plans, and building permits. After hours of reading, she stopped at a page typed Lot 17, Riverfront Red Bank. The property had been purchased by Gregory Bender in 1947, 1 year before Eleanor Dane disappeared. Covering more than 2 acres directly on the Navesink riverbank, roughly 1 mile from where the Ford Tudor was found. Attached was a master plan marking a row of steel warehouses and a trail leading to the water. A penciled margin note caught Kellen's eye. Construction completed 3/48, buried 2 metal drums. The note was signed by the project engineer in April 1948, only 5 months before Eleanor vanished. She immediately photocopied the page and site plan, then searched for transfer records. The file showed Bender sold Lot 17 in August 1956 to a small Red Bank trucking company. The land changed hands several times afterward and was now owned by a construction firm, but nothing indicated the warehouses had ever been fully demolished. Checking modern cadastral maps, Kellen saw the lot boundaries remained unchanged, and the Riverside Trail had been widened into a cargo access road. Comparing coordinates, she confirmed the main warehouse of Lot 17 sat on the same riverbank strip where 1948 search teams had stopped. The discovery was entered as log number 12, RBNK, 2001. Kellen called Lieutenant Myers with a preliminary report. He instructed her to check environmental records, as buried metal drums might have required permits or waste disposal documentation. The next day, at the State Industrial Archives, she located a copy of a 1955 New Jersey Department of Natural Resources inspection report. It stated, Lot 17, Bender Trust, 2 metal drums, abandoned, contents unidentified, sealed and safely buried. No details existed about unsealing or verifying contents. The inspector's final note read, "No further action required, site stable." The line made Kellen think, if the drums were indeed buried in 1948, they could still be underground along the riverbank. She pulled maps from 1950 and 1960 to pinpoint the exact drum locations shown on the plan. On a black and white map, near the water's edge, a small circled symbol labeled B2 matched the note buried drums. She enlarged the image, measured distance to the present shoreline, and marked it on a digital map. The distance from this spot to where Eleanor's Ford Tudor was recovered was less than 1 kilometer. All data pointed to one possibility: Gregory Bender's Riverside warehouse lot could be directly linked to the victim's disappearance. Kellen compiled every document and photocopy into a 9-page report submitted to her superior with a written request: recommend geophysical survey of Lot 17, Red Bank, using ground-penetrating radar to verify condition of 2 metal drums recorded in 1948 construction files. Objective: detect underground anomalies potentially related to Eleanor Dane disappearance. The report was sent to state headquarters at the end of July 2001. Lieutenant Myers approved immediately, noting forward to field technical support team. Kellen signed confirmation and sealed the document package. In the cold case unit summary log, she added one personal line: suspect location, Lot 17. Navesink Riverbank. Direct link to Gregory Bender, 1948. After more than half a century, the name Lot 17 reappeared in the Eleanor Dane file. An old fragment that might be the key to unlocking a case dormant for 53 years. In early August 2001, after the proposal to survey the Lot 17 area was approved, the cold case unit technical team, along with New Jersey state geophysicists, arrived in Red Bank to conduct the on-site examination. The lot was then a materials yard for a local construction company, located along the Navesink River next to an old industrial road. The steel warehouses were rusted, the concrete yard pitted with gravel and weeds. On paper, the place had once belonged to Gregory Bender, but nearly all traces of his ownership had vanished, leaving only collapsed foundations and 2 circular concrete pads noted on old plans. Nora Kellen was present from early morning with 2 forensic technicians and the ground-penetrating radar GPR crew. They set up a scanning grid of 3 parallel 50-meter strips covering the entire river-facing portion of the lot. As the equipment started, the screen displayed subsurface reflection waves. Most data was stable, just natural alluvial layers, but near the riverbank edge, an unusually strong return signal appeared. A circular anomaly, roughly 80–90 centimeters in diameter, at a depth of nearly 3 meters. The technicians marked the spot, planted a red stake, and recorded GPS coordinates. According to the 1948 plan, that was exactly where the engineer had noted buried drums. Kellen halted scanning there and ordered a 5-meter expansion around the point. 2 additional passes yielded the same result, showing the object was isolated, not connected to any other structure. Heller, the team's lead technician, confirmed shape and depth consistent with long-buried metal drums. The preliminary survey report stated, detected high-density circular metallic reflection at 3.1 m depth, West Bank Lot 17. Kellen immediately photographed the site, labeled the position T1, and took 3 surface soil samples from the anomaly area for lab analysis. While working, a technician found a small mud-caked fabric scrap a few meters away in a test pit, curled in damp soil. After rinsing with distilled water, the fibers revealed a pale beige color. The sample was carefully packaged, coded L17V1. The forensic team also recovered a small rusted metal fragment, mixed in the upturned soil, possibly part of a lid or drum shell. Everything was sealed separately and sent to the state lab. After completing the survey, Kellen returned to Trenton to cross-reference data with the 1948 file. According to the old report, the sweater Eleanor wore when leaving the bank was beige cotton knit manufactured by Laramie & Sons. A preliminary lab report received 2 days later confirmed sample L17V1 had fiber structure and dye composition identical to Laramie merchandise from the same production period. Though ownership could not be proven, the results strengthened the hypothesis that Lot 17 was directly linked to the disappearance. Regarding the soil samples, analysis showed surface layers with abnormally high mineral oil and iron oxide, consistent with long-buried metal. The recovered metal fragment was carbon steel, 2 mm thick, standard for 1940s industrial drums. The technical team's report noted, reflective object highly likely a steel drum or industrial container buried for decades. All findings were submitted to Lieutenant Myers on August 9th. He reviewed each radar map carefully and commented, "If these data hold, we have grounds for a formal excavation warrant." That same afternoon, Kellen drafted the warrant application to Monmouth County Court, attaching the GPR report, site photos, and sample analysis results. The request clearly stated the purpose: excavation of Lot 17, coordinates 40.35N, 74.06, W to verify detected metallic object potentially related to the 1948 disappearance of citizen Eleanor Dane. The court received the file and forwarded to the criminal division judge. While awaiting approval, Kellen and the technical team returned to Red Bank to cordon the dig zone, erect temporary fencing, and install night lighting. Every detail was documented with digital photos and added to cold case file 48 NJS 237. As dusk fell, river wind blew across the old yard, carrying the smell of rust and damp oil. In the silence broken only by waves slapping the wooden pier, the red marker stake stood out against the gray grass. Kellen gazed toward the water, picturing the yellowed pages of 1949. More than half a century earlier, Red Bank police had stopped not far from here. Then the case faded into oblivion. Now, with new technology and data, she knew every radar signal, every fabric scrap, every photograph could be the key to reopening history. That evening, back at the office, she received a fax from the court. The excavation warrant was granted, effective for 10 days. In her log, Kellen wrote the final line, "Prepare full excavation phase, Lot 17, Red Bank." On the morning of August 22, 2001, formal excavation at Lot 17 began under supervision of the Cold Case Unit and the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office. A 10-meter radius around marker T1 was sealed with yellow tape. Nora Kellen arrived early with 2 forensic technicians, the geophysics team, and a court representative to oversee procedure. The sky was overcast, temperature low, mud and weeds thick, but all specialists were equipped with mechanical diggers and recording gear. The warrant was valid for 10 days and required continuous photo and video documentation for legal integrity. Work began by removing the top 50 centimeters of soil, then a small excavator took concentric layers around the radar target. At approximately 2.7 meters, the bucket struck something hard, producing a faint metallic clink. Technicians halted the machine and switched to hand shovels and trowels. Damp soil was carefully pushed aside, gradually revealing a curved gray steel surface turned rust red. When the full circle, about 80 centimeters in diameter, was exposed, everyone confirmed it was a metal drum, exterior coated with cracked black asphalt. The forensic team immediately secured the site, posting an Evidence Zone 1 sign. Kellen noted, circular metallic object at 3.05 m depth, matches radar reflection coordinates. A small cut was made at the rim to measure internal temperature and toxic gas levels. Once cleared safe, technicians began peeling away the asphalt layer, taking care not to disturb contents. After nearly 2 hours, the lid was removed. A strong stench of rot and mold escaped, damp earth mixed with oxidized metal. Beneath a compacted soil layer were fabric scraps and bone fragments visible first. Kellen recorded the lid opening time, 11:43 a.m. Inside the drum, material was stratified in 3 layers. The top was soil and sand mixed with wood chips. The middle held remaining fabric. The bottom contained human bone. Each sample was removed with sterile tools and placed on clean nylon tarps. While clearing the middle layer, a technician found a small red object beside the ribs, a woman's leather wallet, old but with intact clasp. Inside were a faded Atlantic Trust bank card and several 1947 date coins. Near the drum bottom, the forensic team recovered a thin silver bracelet engraved ED in flowing script. Kellen carefully placed the bracelet and wallet in separate containers, coded L17, a 3 and L17, a 4 respectively. When all bone was removed, the skeleton was nearly complete. Skull, ribs, arm bones, leg bones, and smaller fragments. Initial examination confirmed adult human female. The skull showed a clear circular fracture on the right forehead, approximately 1 centimeter in diameter, with slight charring around the perforation, classic close-range gunshot entry. A 7 mm metal fragment was lodged in a skull crevice, still faintly silver. Technicians immediately identified it as a .30 carbine projectile, common military issue in the 1940s. The bullet fragment was extracted with tweezers, sealed, coded L17, B1. The on-site report stated, skull shows penetration right to left, 15-degree angle, metal fragment in cranium matches, 30 carbine dimensions. All evidence was arranged in recovery order, photographed in detail before transport to the state forensic lab. Upon excavation completion, the team remeasured depth and pit dimensions, producing a full report with over 60 photos and 7 separate samples. Kellen wrote in her log, asphalt-sealed metal drum containing female remains, red wallet, ED engraved bracelet, .30 carbine bullet fragment, burial clearly intentional. That afternoon, the remains were transferred to the New Jersey State Medical Examiner in Trenton for identification. The bracelet and wallet were stored in an 18 degrees Celsius evidence vault. A rapid forensic summary noted joint measurements indicating victim height 5'5" to 5'7", estimated age 20, 30, matching Eleanor Dane's 1948 description. Fabric scraps in the drum matched the beige sweater sample from the prior survey. Once all evidence was securely transported, the excavation site was backfilled and marked, processed. Cold Case Unit. On the drive back, Nora Kellen opened her notebook and wrote the final entry for that day, Lot 17, Object T1 confirmed as asphalt-sealed metal drum containing female remains. Evidence showing .30 carbine criminal act. After more than half a century, beneath the Navesink riverbank soil, a rusted drum had finally been opened, and with it the first physical remnants of a truth buried since 1948. During the last week of August 2001, the New Jersey State Forensic Laboratory completed analysis of all evidence recovered from the Lot 17 excavation. Every bone sample, bullet fragment and drum material was processed under Cold Case Unit Priority Protocol. Initial results reached Nora Kellen on August 29, comprising identification, ballistics and chemical reports, each clearly marked file hash 48, NJS 237. In the DNA lab, technicians sampled femur and dental tissue, extracting genetic sequences via PCR. Comparison with DNA from a hairbrush retained by Eleanor Dane's family showed perfect 16 locus match, error margin below 0.001%. The report concluded, remains excavated at Lot 17, Red Bank, positively identified as citizen Eleanor Dane, born 1923, missing September 1948. The confirmation was signed by Dr. Joanne Miller, Chief of Forensic Genetics. Upon reading the line, Kellen wrote in her log, "Eleanor has been found." Ballistics analysis ran concurrently. The skull fragment was cleaned, measured at 7.62 mm .30 carbine caliber. Under comparison microscope, rifling marks matched standard M1 carbine barrel characteristics common in the 1940s. To trace exact origin, technicians accessed digitized 1947, 1949 New Jersey civilian firearm records. Data showed Gregory Bender as one of the few Red Bank residents licensed for an M1 carbine. Cross-referencing tax archive ammunition invoices revealed one box Western cartridge, 30 carbine, Lot 2214, purchased May 14, 1948. That lot was produced exclusively for the Northeast market with unique rifling identifiers. Metallurgical analysis of the skull fragment showed lead-zinc alloy ratio identical to Lot 2214, 100% match with Bender's purchase record. The ballistics report concluded, probability that recovered fragment originated from ammunition owned by Gregory Bender, extremely high. Chemical analysis of drum contents further solidified the link. The thick black sealant inside the drum was sampled and run through infrared spectroscopy. Hydrocarbon structure identified it as light industrial lubricant with naphthalene-based additives. Comparison with archived Bender Trust warehouse oil samples showed identical sourcing from Atlantic Petroleum, the region's sole supplier of that exact formula. The chemistry report concluded, sealant in drum matches oil from Bender Trust warehouse, highly likely same supply source. The lab also determined burial method. The drum was asphalt sealed to prevent water ingress. Internally layered with soil, sand and wood for stability. Such construction could not occur naturally and was clearly intentional. Experts concluded burial took place shortly after death. Estimated time of death, based on bone decomposition and surrounding chemistry, fell between September and November 1948. Exactly matching Eleanor Dane's disappearance. The combined report, over 30 pages, was finalized on September 2. Kellen reviewed each section, verifying connections, confirmed DNA identity, .30 carbine bullet from Bender's purchased lot, asphalt sealant from his company warehouse, burial site on property he owned. When aligned, the evidence formed an unbroken chain. Victim disappeared after mailing package to Bender scene contained Bender family DNA evidence, soil and oil, at car recovery site, matched his warehouse remains found in drum buried on his former property, killed by 30 carbine round from ammunition he bought in 1948. Every loose thread from nearly 6 decades earlier now wove into a single logical structure, traceable to one source. In her report to superiors, Kellen wrote, all current forensic data permit conclusive assertion of Gregory Bender's presence at the scene and direct role in Eleanor Dane's death. Physical evidence chain is continuous, consistent, and free of coincidence. Below, she signed and stamped cold case unit. On her desk, photos of the silver ED bracelet and red wallet lay open, tangible symbols of a woman once erased from history, now reaffirmed by the irrefutable language of forensic science. 2 weeks after forensic results confirmed the remains as Eleanor Dane, Nora Kellen received unexpected information from the cold case unit public desk. A middle-aged woman named Diana Bender, Gregory Bender's widow, requested to meet the investigator handling the 1948 Red Bank case. She lived in Florida but had returned to New Jersey to sort old papers after her husband's death in 1987. Among his private documents, she found a small black leather notebook, worn, with many loose entries and several torn pages. She said, "I can't keep this anymore. Some lines scare me." Kellen invited her into a private room and accepted the item as evidence per procedure. The notebook was wrapped in cloth, accompanied by a few folded loose sheets, ink faded brown. Opening it, Kellen saw slanted, uniform fountain pen handwriting interspersed with typed lines. On a page near the end, between two financial notes, a short pencil entry read, "Bring gloves, tape soles, no witnesses." In the bottom left corner of the same page was the initialed signature DB, the handwriting matching Bender's signature in the 1948 bank records. Kellen read it 3 times, then closed the notebook and immediately reported to Lieutenant Myers. He ordered the document sealed and a receipt log created. The notebook was rushed to the New Jersey State Forensic Laboratory for paper, ink, and fingerprint analysis. While awaiting results, Kellen briefly interviewed Diana to verify provenance. She stated Bender had kept the notebook locked in a wooden drawer for years. No one was allowed to touch it. After his death, she cleaned out everything and found it among old files. She had never seen it before, but confirmed the handwriting was her husband's. He was meticulous, always jotting down everything, but some pages I read made no sense. Like plans for something terrible, she said, her voice trembling slightly. 3 days later, the analysis arrived at the cold case unit. The 12-page report had 3 sections: paper, ink, and fingerprints. The notebook paper was Crane and Company cellulose, widely issued in the late 1940s, the same type Atlantic Trust Bank supplied to management for commercial logs. The fountain pen ink contained distinctive tannin, matching Waterman blue-black, imported to the U.S. in 1947. Faint fingerprints on the final page edge, enhanced under ultraviolet light, matched Gregory Bender's prints from his 1947.30 carbine permit application. The forensic conclusion stated clearly, "Item is an authentic document belonging to Gregory Bender, written between 1947-1949. Handwriting, paper, ink, and fingerprints all match." The line, "Bring gloves, tape soles, no witnesses," was enlarged. Pressure analysis showed heavy, hurried strokes, typical of action-oriented notes rather than routine business entries. Another page, a few lines away, contained the phrase Pier 9, delivery. When cross-referenced with the 1948 forged letter bearing the hidden text, Pier 9, G. Kellen recognized the significant overlap. She filed a separate memo. The characters Pier 9 appear in both documents from the same source, probability of same author, extremely high. The new evidence completed the legal chain. Physical fragments, bullet, oil, DNA, were now reinforced by psychological proof, the suspect's own written crime plan. Kellen compiled everything into a report for the state prosecutor. Listing matches, 1 tape soles matched the 1948 scene report, noting unusually flat shoe prints, possibly tape. 2. No witnesses, proved premeditation, not impulse. 3. Pier 9 directly tied to the river dock Eleanor frequented and where her Ford Tudor was found. The report ended with the chief forensic expert's opinion. Notebook demonstrates intent to prepare a premeditated crime, inexplicable for any other purpose. Handwriting authenticated as Gregory Bender's, created during the case time frame. Reading the final conclusion, Nora Kellen underlined 2 lines in red on the master file. Notebook evidence confirms planning, execution, and identity. That afternoon, at the cold case unit briefing, Myers stated briefly, in 1948, Bennett had no DNA, no radar, no spectroscopy. Now we have it all, and we have a confession in ink. Kellen looked at the black leather notebook in its evidence bag on the table, the yellowed pages trembling faintly under the lights. After more than half a century, the faded lines Bender wrote to remind himself to bring gloves and ensure no witnesses had become the final evidence, closing the circle of a case once buried with the steel drum on the Navesink riverbank. In September 2001, after final forensic results were confirmed and the complete report submitted, the cold case unit transferred the entire Eleanor Dane file to the New Jersey Attorney General's office for legal closure. In Trenton, a joint federal-state prosecution team met to evaluate evidence. During a 3-plus-hour presentation, Nora Kellen laid out the full chain, cigarette butt DNA matching the Bender bloodline, .30 carbine bullet from the lot Gregory Bender purchased in 1948, oil and soil sourced from Bender Trust Warehouse, and finally the notebook written in his own hand detailing crime preparation. When the slide displayed the 3 lines, "Bring gloves, tape soles, no witnesses," the room fell silent. Evidence was arranged chronologically, showing Bender stalked Eleanor, planned the murder and body concealment on his own property, staged the scene, and forged the letter to mislead investigators. Chief Prosecutor Linda Navarro concluded in the minutes, "Physical, biological, and documentary evidence fully establish elements of premeditated murder. Sole identified perpetrator, Gregory Bender. Civil records confirmed Bender died February 17, 1974, in Sarasota, Florida, of a stroke. His death precluded prosecution, but under state rules, a case may be administratively closed if evidence meets the beyond reasonable doubt standard." On September 18, 2001, the New Jersey Attorney General's office issued the official finding, Eleanor Dane case, missing 1948, determined homicide committed by Gregory Bender. Motive, personal conflict and jealousy, means M1 carbine .30 caliber. In the press release, the cold case unit detailed the 8-month reinvestigation based solely on physical evidence. Items recovered from Lot 17 and the suspect's notebook demonstrate planned criminal conduct. DNA and ballistics exclude all alternative explanations. The file was archived under new classification, Solved Cold Case, 2001. Under perpetrator, full name Gregory Francis Bender, 1906-1974. Nora Kellen was tasked with the final investigative summary. In her 18-page report she wrote, from 1948 to 2001, file hash 48, NJS 237, passed through 2 generations of investigators, endured the limitations of its era, and was reopened through scientific advancement. All independent evidence converges on one point: Gregory Bender, who possessed motive, opportunity, and means. She signed below and stamped it with the red cold case unit seal. On September 25, at Red Bank Police Headquarters, an internal closure ceremony was held. At the conference table, the current chief read the official document from the state of New Jersey. 1948, Eleanor Dane disappearance determined premeditated homicide. File hash 48, NJS 237, transferred to closed. Solved. When the stamped page was placed back in the box, almost exactly where it had been sealed more than half a century earlier, no one spoke for several minutes. On the new label affixed to the cover, bold print read, Solved Cold Case, New Jersey, 2001. For the cold case unit, this was not just a closed case, but a symbol that justice can be restored, no matter how late. For Nora Kellen, who first broke the seal on the dusty box in storage, the conclusion was more than administrative text. It was the final answer to the line Sheriff Roy Bennett wrote in 1949, file temporarily closed, ready to reopen upon new evidence. 53 years later, new evidence had been found, and justice, though delayed, had finally returned to Eleanor Dane. After the Eleanor Dane case was officially classified, solved cold case, the cold case unit initiated an expanded investigation phase under direction from the New Jersey Attorney General's office. The goal was to review missing persons reports or complaints potentially linked to Gregory Bender during his active years in Red Bank, 1946-1952. Nora Kellen was assigned to lead the data team, supported by 2 Monmouth County investigators. They began with employment and internal records from Atlantic Trust Bank, where Bender had been branch manager. In the bank's archive storage, now merged into a national system, Kellen located over 200 personnel files from the period. Numerous memos, letters, and internal reports describe Bender as strict, perfectionist, prone to deep interference in employees' personal lives. Several handwritten letters from female staff to administration revealed disturbing patterns. Mr. Bender demanded private meetings after hours, making me uncomfortable. He held my hand while signing papers and said inappropriate things. All such complaints were filed internally and never escalated. Kellen cataloged 11 incidents involving harassment or abuse of authority, all dated 1946-1949. Concurrently, the team retrieved lists of employees who abruptly left the bank during the same period. 2 cases stood out. Margaret Doyle, Bender's personal secretary, resigned in October 1948, 1 month after Eleanor Dane vanished. Helen Burns, an accounting clerk, quit in 1950 after a short tenure. Kellen contacted Doyle's daughter, who recalled her mother saying Mr. Bender was terrifying, controlled everyone, and was extremely jealous of any female employee with outside relationships. Though no direct evidence existed, the descriptions helped establish a behavioral pattern. Bender exhibited possessive, controlling tendencies toward women under his authority and used his position to conceal misconduct. Next, the team reviewed Monmouth County police reports from 1946-1952. In storage, they found 3 brief entries documenting temporary disappearances of female employees. All later returned safely, claiming they left town for personal reasons. One 1950 case involved an Atlantic Trust accountant who resigned after receiving a private letter from Bender. She vanished for 2 weeks, then returned and refused further comment. When resignation letter handwriting was compared, experts noted identical characteristics to the 1948 forged letter sent to Eleanor's family, both typed on a 1946 Remington Rand. The report noted, insufficient for criminal charges, but indicates pattern of control and intimidation via documentation. Kellen also requested Bender Trust civil records. There she uncovered multiple complaint letters from female business partners alleging Bender pressured private meetings and used demeaning language. Though merely administrative, they painted a consistent personality portrait, a powerful man leveraging professional status to influence and threaten others. The documents were cited in the Cold Case Unit Supplemental Report, concluding, Gregory Bender's conduct reveals possessive and latent violent tendencies, consistent with motive in the Eleanor Dane homicide. By late October 2001, the historical review was complete. No additional victims were confirmed, no concrete evidence of other crimes emerged. However, Kellen's 17-page synthesis detailed the behavioral model. Bender routinely approached, controlled, and threatened women in personal or professional relationships, displayed extreme jealousy when ties were severed, and used financial resources and status to erase traces. The report concluded, no supplemental victims identified, but recurring conduct and archival records show Bender maintained a prolonged pattern of manipulation and control, consistent with premeditated criminal psychology. Once the report was approved, the Cold Case Unit officially closed the expanded phase. Gregory Bender's file was moved to permanent storage with the note, behavioral pattern established, no additional victims. For Nora Kellen, the review was not merely about finding more victims, but understanding how a man of Bender's status, education, and power could commit such a calculated crime and escape notice for over half a century. In November 2001, as the Cold Case Unit finalized the behavioral pattern report on Gregory Bender, an unexpected development surfaced from the Federal Tax Archive. While examining Bender Trust inheritance records, Nora Kellen located a March 1974 declaration, 3 weeks after Gregory Bender's death, signed by his son Charles Bender. It stated, "Assets no longer of legal value were destroyed per the deceased's verbal will." The phrase "items contained in iron box at Red Bank facility" had been crossed out in the original, but under infrared light, the faded text became legible. Kellen immediately requested copies and opened a separate inquiry into Charles, now 63, residing in Princeton, New Jersey. Through civil databases, she confirmed Charles as sole heir and manager of Bender Trust dissolution in 1975. When invited for cooperation, he remained calm, claiming no knowledge of case-related evidence or any iron box. However, when the team obtained a warrant to search his home for financial records, they discovered, in a personal safe, a brown leather diary, dated 1974, written shortly after Gregory Bender's death. It contained a brief entry, ink blurred but readable, February 28. "Father told me never trust anyone in Red Bank. He said there was an old iron box in the warehouse, wanted me to handle it before anyone found it. I did as told. Don't want to keep anything." Below, another entry dated March 3, "It's done. The smoke smelled awful. But he'll be at peace now." Kellen read the photocopied diary and felt a chill. If accurate, Charles Bender had destroyed evidence, possibly original items or documents tied to his father's murder during estate liquidation. The entire diary was seized, sealed as CB-01, and sent to the lab for ink, paper, and handwriting authentication. Results confirmed the diary was written in early 1974. Ink and paper matched the period. Handwriting matched Charles's signatures in tax records. The report stated, "Diary contents show no signs of forgery. Author is Charles Bender." With this evidence, the New Jersey Attorney General's office issued a subpoena on November 19, 2001, for questioning. Initially, Charles denied everything, calling the entries just imagination, but when confronted with inheritance paperwork and the will, he fell silent. Prosecutor Linda Navarro pressed, "Did you destroy any documents, items, or containers related to your father in March 1974? After a long pause, he answered softly, "There was an iron box. He told me to take it. I didn't know what was inside." According to his statement, the iron box weighed about 20 kilograms, was sealed tight, and was retrieved from the old Bender Trust warehouse in Red Bank. Charles said he took it to the family's private property in Princeton and burned it in an industrial furnace. When the prosecutor asked why he didn't report it to authorities, he replied, "My father said it was private family business, not to be opened by anyone else." Heller, the investigative technician, noted that although no physical evidence remained, Charles's statement matched the 1974 asset logs and the new tax archive discovery, which recorded destruction of sealed container holding internal documents. On November 21, the state prosecutor formally indicted Charles Bender on charges of obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence in connection with the 1948 Eleanor Dane homicide. Because the acts occurred decades earlier, prosecution relied on special statutes for cases whose statute of limitations had not expired upon discovery of new evidence. A temporary arrest warrant was executed the same day. He was released on $50,000 bail. In the 8-page indictment, Prosecutor Navarro stated clearly, "New evidence consisting of personal diary, testimony, and financial records confirms defendant Charles Bender intentionally destroyed the iron box on his father's orders to conceal the 1948 murder." The court scheduled the preliminary hearing for February 2002 in Trenton. Nora Kellen, who initiated the entire reinvestigation, was designated as the expert witness on the evidence chain and historical file. While signing the final handover log to the prosecutor, Kellen paused at the diary line. "The smoke smelled awful, but he'll be at peace now." She understood Charles's actions were not merely shielding a dead father, but unwittingly extending the case's silence by 3 more decades. The upcoming trial would no longer be about the 1948 crime, but a judgment on what people tried to forget, yet history forced them to remember. In February 2002, the Federal Criminal Court in Trenton opened the trial of Charles Bender, Gregory Bender's only son, on 2 counts of obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence related to the 1948 Eleanor Dane murder. This was not a murder trial, since the principal perpetrator had been dead nearly 3 decades, but a trial for concealing a past crime. Nevertheless, the case's symbolic weight packed the courtroom with press, cold case unit specialists, and victim relatives. Nora Kellen, who restarted the entire file, was called as an expert witness. In the opening session, State Prosecutor Linda Navarro summarized the reinvestigation from discovering the still-sealed file #48, NJS 237, to excavating the steel drum at Lot 17, DNA confirmation of Eleanor Dane's identity, ballistics and chemical oil matching, and finally, Gregory Bender's criminal notebook. When the screen displayed the photo of the silver bracelet engraved ED, the gallery fell silent. Navarro said, "The crime was buried in the ground for half a century, but justice was not buried with it. Today we are only trying the final piece of that silence." Defense counsel for Charles Bender argued the defendant acted under obsession with a dying father's last wish and without awareness of the evidence's legal value. However, the prosecution presented the 1974 diary, where Charles clearly wrote, "It's done. The smoke smelled awful. But he'll be at peace now," and tax documents confirming destruction of the sealed iron box. Kellen took the stand and explained the chain. That iron box could have contained records or direct evidence of the murder. The defendant's destruction delayed restoration of the truth by nearly 30 years. Over 3 days of trial, forensic witnesses, DNA experts, and cold case unit representatives presented evidence in turn. Ballistics, chemistry, genetics reports, and Gregory Bender's notebook were all projected in court. The prosecutor concluded, had these materials been destroyed with the iron box in 1974, this case would have remained buried forever. Defense requested leniency, citing the defendant's age and cooperation. Yet the jury unanimously found the destruction of evidence intentional and premeditated. On February 18, 2002, the court sentenced Charles Bender to 10 years imprisonment, the maximum penalty for obstructing justice in a serious criminal case. In pronouncing sentence, Judge Eleanor McAdams said briefly, "You are not responsible for your father's crime, but you are responsible for helping that crime linger in the dark." As the trial ended, Nora Kellen remained in the back row, watching the courtroom lights reflect off the evidence cabinet glass, where the silver bracelet and red wallet recovered from the drum now rested. She understood today's trial was not just judgment for concealment, but the final closure of 53 years of silence. 1 week later, the cold case unit released the final investigative report, over 120 pages, archived as final report, case #48, NJS 237. It stated clearly, the 1948 Eleanor Dane disappearance was solved in 2001 through physical forensics, DNA technology, and geophysical data. Perpetrator identified, Gregory Francis Bender 1906, 1974. Evidence tampering, Charles Bender, sentenced to 10 years in 2002. The final summary presented a clear timeline: disappearance investigation, deadlock, file closure, reopening, re-examination, excavation, perpetrator identification, all linked by forensic science and the persistence of the next generation team. On March 5, 2002, the file was officially transferred to the State Archive in Trenton. Kellen personally sealed the new evidence box, affixing a white label printed in bold, "Solved, 2001. Case closed by cold case unit." Inside, alongside the final report, were copies of 1948 scene photos, the Lot 17 map, and the forged letter once thought to be Eleanor's last message. As the lid closed, she signed the red wax seal, just as Sheriff Roy Bennett had in 1949. But this time, added a new note below, closed, solved, Trenton, 2001. That afternoon, In the small cold case unit office, Nora Kellen wrote the last line in her investigative log, 53 years. From the moment Eleanor left Atlantic Trust Bank until the day justice was confirmed. Time cannot erase truth, it only makes it wait longer. She set the notebook down and watched the late-day sun stream through the window. On the Nabisink riverbank in Red Bank, the water still flowed quietly as it had half a century earlier, but now everything once buried deep beneath the soil had been given its true name. The Eleanor Dane case, #48, NJS 237, was fully closed, becoming part of New Jersey judicial history. Solved, 2001. The story of the Eleanor Dane case is not merely a personal tragedy in 1948 America, but a reflection of social issues that persist today: power, silence, and the value of justice. Gregory Bender, a man of status, education, and respect, exploited his position to manipulate, control, and ultimately destroy a young woman who dared break free from that control. Decades later, his own son prolonged the silence by destroying evidence, believing the truth could be buried forever. Yet the story proves the opposite. Justice may arrive late, but it never vanishes. In 2001, thanks to DNA technology, ground-penetrating radar, and the efforts of investigators like Nora Kellen, the truth was finally uncovered. From this we learned that science, perseverance, and transparency are indispensable foundations for resisting unjust systems of power, whether in the justice system, in business, or in personal relationships. In modern American life, that lesson remains fully relevant. Technology can help us find the truth, but what matters more is professional ethics and the courage to speak up. When signs of abuse, cover-up, or injustice appear, whether at work, in the community, or within families, silence only prolongs the crime. Eleanor Dane's story reminds today's Americans that justice is not something that comes naturally. It is the result of people willing to face the truth, no matter the cost. Every individual, even through small acts, like reporting wrongdoing or preserving evidence, can help ensure that the Lot 17s, society's dark corners, no longer have room to hide crimes. If you believe that truth, no matter how long it's been buried, deserves to be found, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue reopening cold cases forgotten by time. Thank you for following the story of Eleanor Dane. See you in the next video, where we'll once again search for justice in the shadows of old America.